Some of you are listening to this thinking you woke up from a dream, that Utah did beat Houston, that last night didn't happen, that Isaac Wilson, Brandon Rose doesn't matter. Miscues, mistakes continue to just mar this Utah team. And one of the most disappointing losses I can fathom just took place. Utah lost to Houston. Why did it happen? How did we get here in a season that was meant to be so much greater? We're breaking it down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Utah rivals Matt Patton to just talk about Utah's fourth straight loss, none of which have come against really that impressive of teams. I've liked some of the things Arizona State's done, but even they've underwhelmed a lot too. And then, Houston was a contender for one of the worst teams in Power 4, and they just beat Utah. So there's a lot we can say, and we will say. We're going to break down what's going on with the quarterback room. Why is Utah's offensive line struggling? Why did the defense give up over 200 yards on the ground when they were a top 5 run defense a year ago with a lot of the same pieces back? But I think the number one thing we have to start with, Matt, and it's a very painful revelation to make, this is a bad football team right now, and I can't believe I'm saying that at this point in the season that I thought would be Utah well on their way to a Big 12 title, at least berth in the championship game, and they are so far out of contention. And honestly, you could argue they're the worst team in this conference right now, and that's how poorly they're playing.
There's no way to sugarcoat it. A complete shock, just a team that's completely fallen apart.
Yeah, they have in so many ways. I mean, like I said, there's so many different places we can start at. Let's start with the quarterback situation. Wilson struggled, but Rose did too. Was it the right move to bench Wilson? I mean, sure, it's fine. There wasn't much of a difference. Neither one was great. I mean, you see Rose trying to force that one ball deep to me. Hey, Munir McClain. This was the game where we saw all of our forgotten Utah guys. Munir McClain, Jalen Glover popped up.
They're back.
Landon King nearly had a grab, but one of the problems even with Brandon Rose, and you can do this is what's so frustrating about watching this Utah team. Utah's not good. I just said that. Utah had so many opportunities to win this game on this play or that play. One that jumps out to me about where Wilson is just making mistakes that you just can't make. The first, actually it was the second Cole Becker field goal attempt, I believe. They have a bubble screen to Zipper. It's an easy throw for Wilson, and he misses it. And Utah has to settle for the field goal, and it's missed. And it's just you cannot miss a throw like that. It doesn't get easier than that. Brandon Rose, you can't make that turnover there. It was a nice play by the linebacker, but Rose was late coming back, stared Ryan down for way too long too. And even one of the first drives I remember that Rose was in, right? There's just, whether it's Rose or Wilson, there's almost always a better play to be made than they make. They are not the only things wrong with this Utah offense. There were key drops. The play calling by Bajakian I actually thought was decent overall, but I'm not going to say it was perfect. The other thing I do definitely want to say is the interior offensive line for Utah, as well as the tight ends in blocking form, are just not performing well right now. But there's always plays that Wilson and Rose make, and more times than not, I'm that's not the right play. For example, there was the drops by Singer and Pittman on Rose's first drive. He rolls out. He's looking at Landon King downfield. If he just tucks it and runs, he easily gets the first down. There's a defensive lineman chasing him down. He's easily got him beat, but he tried to force the pass downfield. The guy was not open. So just, you want to know what's the biggest thing wrong with Utah right now in general? It's that, unfortunately, they don't have a quarterback.
Yeah. I after this game, to try to make myself feel better somehow, I decided, hey, I'm going to look at the teams that were expected to do well this year and have completely fallen apart. So I looked at Florida State. I looked at Oklahoma.
I knew you were going to say that.
Those are the two, Florida State and Oklahoma. And both of them, Oklahoma lost Dylan Gabriel. Jordan Travis left from Florida State, and both of those teams have completely fallen apart. But I didn't tell you this pregame when we were chatting a little bit because I wanted you to have a full reaction. But the impact was not just on the passing game. Florida State right now is the second to worst rushing offense and Oklahoma's number 114. So the rushing game gets impacted by that change in quarterback. And guess what? Utah, in the past 3 games without Rising, they've averaged just 80.7 yards a game. That's number 127 in the nation. And they've been outrushed 653 yards to 242. So their rushing game has completely fallen apart, not just on offense, but also on defense. And Whittingham said this over and over. If you lose the rushing battle, you're usually going to lose the game. And we've seen that. I mean, it's not just bad. I think Bernard's wearing out. He's not used to these types of carries. So I think that's a big part of it. When your quarterback changes, it definitely impacts the pass game. Utah fans are very aware of that. But you look at the rush game, and that too falls because of the change in quarterback.
Yeah, there's several runs where I'm like, why did this run fail? And I'd rewind my TV real quick and watch it. And it's an 8-man box, or the safeties and corners are playing so close to the line, they can quickly come down and run support and cover it up. Not to mention, what we also can talk about is Utah's offensive line is not playing. I should say, Spencer Fano and Caleb Loma, and I think PFF's been very kind of, they're playing really well overall right now. I think they're playing very good. The interior offensive line for Utah is not doing great. You're on your 3rd string right guard at one point in Moyai, and he had penalty. He was getting pushed back. He was struggling. Falcon, when he was in there, he was struggling. Jaron Kump hasn't been able to really put it together. It's just been a rough go for him as of late. Tongai, another one who's struggling. And as I mentioned too, I think this is one thing that is really disappointing about this Utah. Well, Brant Keithy's fantastic, right? Like, he had an awesome 70-yard touchdown. That's what's so funny, right? Like, early on in the game, Utah has that 70-yard touchdown. We're like, we're back with Jakey, and we're all good. Like, this is going to be Utah's offense. And even outside of that, like, they were moving the ball early, I remember, and then they end up stalling to some of the missed field goals. And Wilson, he gets hurt in the end zone at 1.2. I don't know how much that impacted his play. Didn't seem like too much, but just something that did happen. And then, but just so many plays where you're just like, and the tight ends, like I was saying. So Keithy's really good receiving tight end. Utah doesn't have a blocking tight end. And I think that's one thing that's crazy is this team, it's for 2 years now, they haven't replaced Logan Kendall. They've tried to make Miggy Suguturaga a tight end. Honestly, with the way Utah's defensive ends are in run support, sometimes like Connor O'Toole one time got shoved around by a tight end. And Connor played well. He did some nice things in the game, but it'd be nice to have a bigger, stronger tight end at times, especially I like Logan Fano. He flies upfield all the time. I think the offensive have realized, hey, if we just do a pass set here, this dude will run himself out of the play. And that's what happens. And not in Utah's locker room. I don't know what's happening there, but I just see far too often the teams have success running to the right of Utah's defense because in part Fano flies upfield a lot. So that's a problem. That's where it helped to have Mickey there. Dallin Bentley, Carson Ryan, Keithy, they're not very good blockers. I mean, just calling it as is. This Utah team has a lot of issues right now. And once again, it's why this team is not very good. The offense is dreadful. The defense is a good unit. I mean, 2 stops inside on the 1-yard line. That's insane. Like, and we'll talk more about them because they had some not great moments late too, but the defense played more than good enough for Utah to win this game. But as you said, Matt, not running the ball. And I mean, the throwing game, it's just a mess. One moment there'll be an awesome pass, and then the next 3, it's just like, what are you doing? Which is also why it makes it maddening, because when Utah made the switch when they just came out in the second half, it was Wilson. I think they went right to Rose after. They threw it 6 straight times. Like you said, the running game's not fantastic, but there's got to be a balance when you have backups in.
Well, and you look at a guy, they finally used Glover, and he looked fantastic. He had 4 carries. I think it went 2, 22, 4, and 5. But he looked fresh. He looked good. He didn't touch the ball in the fourth quarter. And when you have 2 quarterbacks that you can't trust, and you have the lead most of the game, why? Yeah, why would you keep passing the football? I mean, Houston figured that out. They ran it something like 50 times, hardly passed the ball, and they won the game. It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and it is. Yeah, we'll have to talk about Utah's concern there, but it's going to be. This is where it gets really hard, and we'll talk about this a lot this week. With the way Utah's playing right now, it's hard to find a path for them to not just get bowl eligible, but even win another game this season. The UCF game is very winnable in terms of how the Knights have looked, but that's a cross-country road game in a Utah offense that is just, once again, like absolutely abysmal. Utah may have one of the worst offenses. Actually, they definitely do have one of the 5 worst Power 4 offenses right now. Like, I don't even think it's a debate. Utah is the biggest disappointment in college football to me, right? Actually, well, that's not fair. Florida State's up there too. Utah's easily one of the three, and you mentioned Oklahoma too. They can be in there, although at least Oklahoma fought today against Ole Miss, and I guess Utah technically did, but it's different when you do it. You're fighting against Houston versus Ole Miss, and we all love Jackson Dart being from Utah and everything, but yeah, I mean, once again, we'll talk a lot about the offense this week. The quarterback situation is an absolute mess. Utah does not have a starting quarterback on this roster. The interior offensive line is not performing well. Dorian Singer is awesome. I think Utah's receivers, the Utah skill position players, are not doing that bad. I liked a lot of things Majakian did, but when you have quarterbacks who miss throws, when you cannot establish the run game because your interior offensive line, your tight ends are struggling to run block. And I will say too, like those drops, the ones that Pittman, Singer had, like there's in the penalties. I mean, oh my gosh, that's the final thing I want to bring up before we move to the offense. Utah's penalties in this game. This is a team that was penalized 7 times. Like Kyle Whittingham's team had 4 more penalties than Houston. That doesn't happen with Utah football, and it's why they're in the worst spot they've been in since 2017, Matt, which is still just hard to understand how we're here.
Well, and a lot of that is young players. You look at a lot of those penalties, it's guys that probably shouldn't have been on the field at all this season. But yeah, it just, they don't appear to be as focused and as cohesive as they've been in the past. And that's troubling.
Incredibly troubling. Well, you mentioned the focus thing. One thing that was very interesting is this comes from Josh Furlong's X account, who tweeted out, they asked Mekhi Bernard on why Utah has fallen apart. Mekhi said, can't answer that. I'm not going to answer that. I know what it is, but I'm not going to answer that. I can't believe he said that last part. I can't believe he said that, because all we're going to be is like, wait, what just happened? What did you say? And then when asked for any more,
frustrated he is.
Yeah. And then when he asked for any more insight, he said, no, I'm sorry. Can't. Sorry. Appreciate you. Adds the team will continue to fight. Utah, once again, like Utah, you watch every game and you're like, oh my gosh, like if they just did this, like if this throw was made, if this was blocked better, if you don't get this penalty, like they're right there and they easily win today. But I'll also say this, like, squeaking out a win against Houston doesn't bode much confidence. Now, not finding a way to win against Houston is what has me fired up at this time of night, and us calling Utah one of the biggest disappointments in all of college football. So, yeah, the offense is a mess. We'll continue to talk about it throughout the week. But I do want to move on to the defensive side of the ball. They did a lot of good things, but there's definitely some other tough conversations you have to have about this Utah defense. We'll have those in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Zybotics. Zybotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zybotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how it works. First, you just got to drink pre-alcohol. For the best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Then pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. And then last but not least, just wake up feeling refreshed the next day. Go to zybotics.com/lockedoncollege. That's ZBIOTICS.com/lockedoncollege, all caps, no spaces. To learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use that code lockedoncollege at checkout. Zybotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zybotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code lockedoncollege, all caps, no spaces at checkout for 15% off your order today. All right, Matt, let's continue to talk about an incredibly disappointing chapter in Utah's just football history. I mean, my gosh, this is I think this is the most disappointing loss since I've been attached to this Utah team for the past few years. And I mean, that goes back to obviously just the 2019 team, right? Like this team took a turn in 2017, the way in the trajectory of the program. And now they've regressed to something that's even worse than that. And part of the reason you regress to that point, number one, like we said, it's the multitude of issues the offense has. We've called out players, but we've called out several players because they're just not playing up to their standard. And now you look at the defensive side of the ball for this Utah team. And it's so crazy because you look at it, 2 red zone stops, couple turnovers for this Utah defense too, but just late when there were plays to be made, they couldn't. I think the biggest thing I want to say about the defense, and number one, they did some good things yet again. So many opportunities for Utah to get the big defensive touchdown in this one. And it just feels like it's the type of play that Utah makes in the past, whether it's Lander Barton, who had a lot of issues today. He did not play. He just didn't play well. I'll be honest. He just didn't play well. A lot of missed tackles. He made his best play of the year, the goal line stop on 4th and 1.
Yeah,
and there were
great.
several opportunities where he's one-on-one with Chris or the running back. It's like, oh, this is Lander Barton. This is the guy that's, first round linebacker, all those things like that. And he couldn't make the tackle. And there was a lot of that tonight for Utah. We talked about some of the issues Logan Fano had earlier too. And as good as Connor O'Toole had moments, there's a couple spots where Connor O'Toole's getting blown off the ball by a tight end. It's like, that can't happen to a starting defensive end. The injuries to Utah's defensive tackles, I mean, it's just detrimental. And Dallas Vailaki is going to be a dude for this Utah football team.
Yeah.
To ask a true freshman to go out there and do that is just tough. And part of the reason this Utah run defense to me has regressed is we haven't seen Tanu Vasa and Tafuna on the field together very much at all this season. I'm even trying to remember because they've both been injured, both of them out tonight. When you're losing two of your top D tackles, we saw how that really hurt Utah because some of those runs that get sprung, like the big ones, those two guys aren't able to break out of the double teams.
Yeah, it's really the heart of the defense is gone when those guys are out. Those are the guys they're the ones that are loud. They're the ones that are getting the team pumped up. Tanavasa is always trying to pump up the crowd. Obviously, you don't do that in Houston, but these are the guys that get kind of the energy going. And when they're on the sidelines, it's unbelievable, honestly, to have four of your entire defensive tackle rotation, right? Even Tavita Fotu, he's been around the program a long time, but he's never been kind of that rotation guy. And you have to plug him in there because four guys are out with injury. And the interesting thing is they keep saying not medically cleared. And so is this a part of the situation too? Do they have somebody that is just really hesitant to clear players? Because it doesn't seem like any other school in all of college football has this many players sitting on the sidelines every game.
I think you're 1000%, like when you continue to have this amount of injuries to your program, like with the state that Utah football is now in, 4 straight losses, you have to just reevaluate everything you're doing. Are you taking care of your guys correctly? Because last year, crazy fluky injuries, like last year was crazier than this year, but the key injuries continue to mount. And this team has not been fully healthy, I don't think, for a game. I mean, maybe the opener against Southern Utah, but like outside of that, like we've never seen, and no team stays healthy throughout the year. But the fact that we never even saw really a taste of this Utah team at full health is also just where it stings. And it is a lot of those reserves who are making some of those plays. One thing that would have been massive for Utah is Elijah Davis had a chance on a bailed screen late in this game. It was just an incomplete pass. Davis' head is down. If his head is up and he looks at the ball, he could have picked it off and ran it to the house for 6. That's a tough play to make, but it's just the kind we've seen this Utah defense make in the past. Same thing as Lander Barton getting on the ball, as we discussed. And I think you make a great point, talk about Tavita Fotu, and then Dallas Vailaki falls in this situation too. Those guys have been fantastic as reserve players. When they have to play more minutes, you see tonight a couple of the warts pop up where it's like, oh, they're awesome on this play. Like there were plays on the goal line where Fotu blew him up. Dallas Vailaki, he blows it up. But then there's another play. It's like, oh, where are those guys? Oh, they're getting driven 5 yards off the ball because they can't stand up to double team because they're getting tired. And part of it too.
That's exactly
Samote Pepa falls in that realm as well too. That's a guy that also had his struggles. And I mean, like you said, this Utah defense did a lot of really good things tonight, but there were also like, why is this big run here? Like, it wasn't on Zamiah Vaughn as much, the late touchdown. That was a nice route. I wish Utah almost could have passed that off. I haven't seen that concept before. I wish Vaughn would have not missed the tackle after.
Yes.
But that's where that one's tough too. We talked about Teo Johnson missed some tackles in this game for Utah as well. So, I mean, this is a team, you win and lose as a team. And that's what happened for Utah too. This defense is playing well enough, though. One, I do want to give them a lot of credit. 2, if Cam Rising was healthy, like Utah would be fine on like the defense. The defense is not the issue with this team. They're not as good as I thought they would be this year. It's a top 5 rush defense that's absolutely regressed for a couple reasons. But I do want to be fair to them too. They've done enough where this team would probably only have 1 loss right now if like Cam Rising was back and healthy, because they're doing a lot of good things. They just weren't able to put the team on their back like they have in the past. They've regressed like the rest of the team has.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's almost like I think in past years the Utah defense they had that intimidation factor. You didn't want to play that Utah defense because they are mean and they're going to make you hurt. Doesn't seem like that this year. Even though they've done a great job, they're keeping teams out of the end zone, but they don't seem to really cause fear to opposing offenses. I don't know. They don't have the swagger. They don't have the energy. I don't know.
It's weird too, because it'll be there for a moment. They'll get the big fourth down stop on the goal line, and then it's like, and that's also what's so frustrating about this team is they've given up way too many 20-yard runs, and then they'll do that, and then they'll toughen up, and there'll be 3 runs in a row, and the team will get maybe 5 yards on all 3 plays. It's just
they still have one of the best red zone defenses, one of the best third down defenses. So they make
secondary
plays when they need to.
Yeah, the secondary held up. Houston had less than 70 passing yards. I want to say in this one, Chris made a couple of nice throws, but just the devastating penalties. There was a hands to the face one early that hurt.
Oh yeah,
and Utah keeps putting themselves in negative positions, and a tough day for Utah all around. You got so much to clean up over the course of the bye week. You have to just be more disciplined, avoid the penalties. I just can't. I think one of the biggest things that drives me just absolutely nuts is when I looked at this team coming into the season, I felt so good about the front seven. And I don't know who's how healthy or who's not healthy, but they really only lost Joe Nellis. Le'Veon Demuni, we can rope into that as well. Jonathan Hall, a nice play on the interception. That got lodged in between like that. Jonathan Hall, every game has up and down moments. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Hall. I think he's going to be a good player. He will lay a massive hit, and then you're like, where's Jonathan Hall? And it's oh, wait, the offensive line engulfed him. He's not going to play. So that's kind of the Jonathan Hall experience right now, which is a lot of these guys. As we said, there's really not a lot of guys on this Utah team that can be oh my gosh, they're playing fantastically. Obviously Brant Keithy was really good in this game. Dorian Singer did some nice things, but even he'll have a drop. Mekhi Bernard, as we said, he still does good things. Jalen Glover too, but just doesn't come together consistently enough. And whenever you have, and that's the key to when you're really good teams, you are consistent, right? There's a reason Oregon is undefeated. There's a reason BYU is undefeated. Is there a little luck on your side in some of those? I sure, with what happens in some ways with BYU, but more than anything, they have been good enough and consistent enough to put themselves in position to win. And you do not find ways to continue to win unless you're a good team. BYU's proven that. All Utah's done is continue to find ways to lose. And that's what's so maddening about a team that was the preseason Big 12 pick because of how much experience they return. And it's that experience as well as the injuries. And in a lot of ways too, Utah has been, I don't think that Utah got drastically outcoached in this game. If you want to say they did maybe a little bit, a lot of it came down to players not making plays though, more than anything I'd probably say, but just I still Utah might be the worst team in the Big 12 right now. That. How is that possible? And it's just, we see it. It's players not executing, not doing their jobs. And this is just a massive regress here for this Utah football program. And that just pains me to say it.
Yeah. I can't think right now. If you were to ask me, I can't think of another team that I could say is worse in the Big 12 right now than Utah. And their conference record reflects that. You really can't say there's, you could, who,
right?
There isn't anybody. They already lost to TCU.
I would have said Houston. That's the thing.
Yeah, it would have been Houston.
They just beat us.
Lost to Houston. So this is where we're at. This is the situation of Utah football now is, and maybe they have to look at that and say, what do they do at this point to prepare for next year? Teams that are in this situation have to start looking forward to make sure that it doesn't continue, but that might mean playing some guys that will hopefully be with the program. It's hard to say what this how this will impact things too.
Yeah, and I have and you're absolutely right about who will be with the football program. Who won't. One of the fascinating things is going into this year, man, I was high. I was obviously I was high on this Utah football team, and I was wrong, but I was high on this team having several NFL draft picks. With the way a lot of these guys are performing, we've talked about a lot of guys and just been honest about the way they're playing right now. It is hard for me to see an NFL team being yep, you're a top 3-round NFL draft pick. Some of the guys will still get that, but there are other guys who probably thought they'd be in the first and second round conversation. Who are they going to want to go if they're going to be a third and fourth round pick? Maybe they will, but maybe they'll want to come back. So like, that's where it's going to be really interesting to see who on this team does come back. Some of these guys, even though like this was the last year of the COVID year, like there will still be some guys who have that extra year because of medical red shirt or whatever, happens too. So we'll see who comes back. But yeah, I mean, the fact that this Utah football team was 4-0 and right now the most likely outcome to their season based on how they've performed is ending the season with, was that 8 straight losses? I mean, that's hard to even say, but like that's what it would be because we're going to the bye week now and you're not better than BYU. You're not better than Iowa State. You're not better than Colorado. Is there a world where you could be better than UCF? I mean, I guess, but you're also on the road in that game. And as of late, UCF has looked more impressive. And
they can run the ball.
It's just shocking. Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, it's better than Utah's offense right now.
That's better than what Utah's doing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of tough conversations I think this team needs to have, right? Like a lot of people you'll always see after a loss like this is like, oh, Kyle Whittingham's the problem. Like, no, like, yes, Kyle's having a rough year, but with what Kyle Whittingham has done for the Utah football program, like, and still, like, I would trust Kyle over anyone to figure things out and get this team back on track. Kyle is going to be the coach at Utah for you as long as he wants to be, and he is nowhere near the biggest problems this group is having. As we talked about, if players are executing better, and Witt deserves some of the blame, but if players execute better in this game, Utah's fine. And it's the same thing with Morgan Scalley, too. His defense only gave up, I mean, really only 14 points. I actually wasn't even sure their kicker was going to make it at the end of the game because they showed his long was what, 43? His long was 44 and they had him at 43.
3 of 10 in his career beyond 40 yards. So that it wasn't a likely kick for him to make, and he just made it. I mean, and it was the ugliest kick. I mean, it came through.
And I'll give him credit. Like, he made it, but like when he was walking out there, I'm like, this guy did, like, I just don't think he's gonna make it. Like, he doesn't look like he's gonna make it. Like, all across the world, he made it. I just didn't think like he would look like he was like trying to tell his teammates like, I got this. And it's like, do you really got this? And it's like, okay, you do got it. I'll give you credit for that, and I'll give Houston credit. This was a game coming in the year. I thought there was no way that Utah would lose to Houston, and credit to Houston. The Cougs showed up. They buckled their chin straps. They made more plays to win this game than Utah did. They're better than Utah right now. And that's not saying a lot, which is such a painful thing to say yet again. So a lot of tough conversations over the bye, a lot of things to work out. We heard from Kai Bernard's quote about he knows it's wrong, but won't say it. Like, what does that mean? So that's a
real concern.
We'll see what all happens. I'll be breaking down what I saw, even more detail on some of the film, and I'll go back through and watch it tomorrow. But I mean, none of the thoughts and things changed from what we said today, Matt. This is a massive disappointment. You just can't like put into words like how poor of a state Utah is in right now. They could get on track for next year again, sure, but like this is a team that was going to be year in and year out a conference contender in the Big 12. We cannot call Utah a contender in the Big 12, even going into next year, in my opinion, unless they make major changes over the offseason, because what they put out on the field has just been a letdown of epic proportion.
Yep. Perfectly stated. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. I was going to say, you got anything else to add, but honestly, I feel like we've vented enough, haven't we?
Yeah. You can only say so much about a team that just, it's the same things week after week. I'm sure that's driving Whittingham crazy because they should be able to figure out ways to fix it.
Driving Whittingham crazy. It's driving all of us crazy. I know how many of you are going to be in the comments tomorrow, not even reacting to what we say, just getting your own frustrations out. And guess what? You are welcome to do so. This is a safe space. You just listen to us vent for all this time. So we would like to do the same for you. But that'll do it for our show today. Matt, where can people get more of your work?
Utah.rivals.com. Utah Nation.
Well, give him a follow. Give him a follow on X, Patton_Matt as well. Always drops fantastic Utah stats. Always great having you on. Thanks again, Matt.
Yep, appreciate it. Take care.
That does it for a episode of Locked On Utes in which we had to talk about a loss for a 4th straight week. There's a lot of questions Utah has to answer. We're breaking down a lot of them on tomorrow's show all week long, monitoring the changes, the statements, everything that comes out, where Utah can go from here, what's next. That'll be on tomorrow's Locked On Utes. Hope you'll join us then, and I hope your Sunday is a lot better than your Saturday night. Have a good night, everyone.